V. Kogekar Memorial Lecture. Let us get started with the event. I would like to extend a warm welcome to our respected guests. The guests for the session are Justice Hemant Gokhale, Mrs. Gokhale, Ambassador M.K. Mangalmurthy, Air Marshal Bhushan Gokhale, Major General Shishir Mahajan, Vice Chancellor Dr. Ajit Ranade, Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, SIS Secretary M.B. Deshmukh. Thank you so much, everyone, for gracing us with your presence here today. I would now like to welcome Air Marshal Bhushan Gokhale for further addressal of the event.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a long time after the meeting. We've had a break almost for 4 years of this memorial lecture. So at the outset, let me pay my respect to late Professor Kogekar. And we are really honored that a number of members of Kogekar family are here who instituted this particular talk many years ago. And one of the architects of this particular talk was also the president then of Center for Advanced Strategic Studies, Dr. Madhav Kodbole, former Home Secretary. And unfortunately, we lost him this year. So may I request you all to please stand up for a minute in his memory. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The Center for Advanced Strategic Studies was formed in 1992, and we have Ambassador Mangalmurthy, who's the president. And I must thank Dr. Ajit Ranade, the Vice Chancellor of Gokhale Institute, for hosting this, because there is a close relationship of Professor Kogekar with this institution. So we really thank you, sir. I will introduce you to Professor Kogekar, and it so happens that before I joined NDA in 1964, he was a principal in Ferguson College. Born on 2nd March 1914, he did BA Honours from Bombay, then Bombay, BSc Economic Honours, London School of Economics, and he was a student of famous economist Harold Rothsky. He joined the Deccan Education Society in 1937 as Professor of Economics and Political Science and was a life member of the society. Later, he was Vice Principal of BMCC, which is just next door, and later he also took over as a Principal of Commerce College. And after completing his tenure in BMCC, he became the Principal of Ferguson College from 1957 to 1964. After retirement, he held a number of appointments. I must mention that he was a member of the Forward Markets Commission, contributed a number of articles to various Indian and international academic journals. Many reports, including report of the 1952 general elections, are to his credit. He was the president of All India Political Science Association in 1961, vice president of International Political Science Associations from 61 to 64, Dean Faculty of Mental, Moral and Social Sciences, University of Pune from 1961 to 1963. He was a member Executive Council, Indian Institute of Public Administration, which, as you know, was formed in 1954. And since his foundation, he was a member till 1966. He was later a member of various committees, including on Planning Commission, Universities Grants Commission, including the Administrative Reorganization Committee appointed by the State Government of Maharashtra, Chairman of Cotton Textile Committee, attended a number of international conferences related to education, administrative science, and political science. He was Vice Chancellor of Tilak Maharashtra Vidyapith, and as you know, it's in Pune, and it's thanks to his efforts that it became a deemed university. He was actively involved with the Indian School of Political Economy from his inception till a few years ago and served in various capacities, including as president. He was well known as an exceptionally good teacher and orator, both in English and Marathi. Known for his speaking his mind out boldly without mincing any words and without fear or favor. His Gokhale Memorial Lecture in 1976 during emergency against the extension of the term of the parliament is a case in point. Intellectually active till the end, he used to write book reviews which were published in EPWD and Freedom First, and the last such review was just a few weeks before he sadly left us on 26th of May in 2007. I must also mention that we are collaborating with, as I mentioned, Gokhale Institute, and we have a very illustrious Vice Chancellor, Dr. Ajit Ranade. His career has spanned both in academics and corporate assignments. He was earlier Group Executive President of a Chief Economist, Aditya Birla Group, an Indian multinational with $60 billion conglomerate. Ranade is a member of Executive Committee of Apex Industry Chambers, including CII, FICCI, and Maratha Chambers. He's also been a member of board of several companies and trusts. He writes in the business press on economics and current topics, and he's a co-author of an award-winning book, Rising to the China Challenge, which was under the auspices of Pune International Center. Ranade is co-founder and trustee of Association of Democratic Reforms, a citizen watchdog body. He's a trustee of Pune International Center and an honorary senior fellow of the Takshashila Institution. Ranade holds a BTech in electrical engineering from IIT Bombay and is alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad. He received his PhD in economics from Brown University and received Distinguished Alumnus Award from IIT Bombay in 2009. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take this further.
Thank you so much for your address, sir. We are truly honored to have such great personalities here today with us. As such, let us present our gratitude with a token of welcome. I request Ambassador M.K. Mangalmurthy, President of Center for Advanced Strategic Studies, to felicitate our chief guest, Justice Hemant Gokhale, with a token of welcome. Justice Hemant Gokhale, ladies and gentlemen. We are also truly honored to have with us Mrs. Gokhale present in the session. I request Mrs. Godbole to felicitate Mrs. Gokhale with a token of welcome. Mrs. Gokhale, ladies and gentlemen. I again request Air Marshal Bhushan Gokhale to brief us about the guests as well as the topic we will be having today. Thank you.
I'm back again to introduce you the chief speaker today. And it was Dr. Godbole who had mentioned to me that we must invite Justice Hemant Gokhale for this lecture. Unfortunately, because of COVID, the whole thing kept on getting postponed. But finally, we are here for this particular day. And thank you, sir, for coming all the way from Mumbai and being with us. I must also give you a brief profile of Justice Gokhale. He's MA LLM from University of Mumbai. And in that, he obtained the first rank in LLM exam in the university with constitutional law and international law as his special subjects. Associated with Yuvak Kranti Dal, Ukraine, a youth organization while in his college days, he worked in refugee camps during liberation struggle of Bangladesh. He wrote a series of 10 articles in Marathi weekly Sadhana from Pune, and later it has become a book for which late Dr. Madhav Godbole is given a foreword. He practiced as an advocate in Bombay High Court, mainly in matters concerning industrial law, constitutional law, and public interest. Appointed as a judge in Bombay High Court in January 1994, he functioned as a judge in Gujarat High Court during 1994 and 1990 till 1999, and in Bombay High Court during 1999 to 2007. Then he was Chief Justice of Allahabad High Court from March 2007 to March 2009, and then Chief Justice of Madras High Court from 2009 to April 2010, when he moved to the Supreme Court, and thereafter he retired on 9th March 2014. Participated in law seminars in the universities of South Africa. He visited Supreme Courts of England and USA, delivered lectures in Spring Law School in Dhaka in March 2020, and as I said, he's written articles on all his experiences for his visit also in Weekly Sadhana, which is compiled in the book. And it's really a great honor for us that he will be speaking on a very, very important topic of Bharat Ratna Dr. Ambedkar's vision. Thank you, sir. Thank you again. Over to Justice Gokhale for his lecture.
Namaskar, dignitaries on the dais and in the audience, young students and other ladies and gentlemen. To begin with, I thank the organizers for inviting me to deliver this Dr. Kogekar Memorial Lecture. I did not have the opportunity to meet Professor Kogekar, but I was fortunate to meet his daughter, Sujata Tai Godbole, who is present today in this function, and his son-in-law, Dr. Madhavrao Godbole, and through them came to know about the contribution of Professor Kogekar, an eminent professor of economics. At the outset, I pay my tribute to Professor Kogekar. I must also pay my tribute to Madhavrao Godbole, who in fact first invited me to deliver this lecture. That was, however, before the onset of COVID, and obviously the lecture could not be arranged during those days. But it so happened that during that period, I completed my book on Bangladesh in Marathi, and with a very little acquaintance, Madhavrao wrote a lucid and erudite foreword, which was a great honor to me. Probably that must be his last writing, because unfortunately, thereafter, in a very short span, he passed away. He wanted my book to be translated in English, and before it was translated and published, Madhavrao had passed away. As a senior IAS officer, Madhavrao played his part in every position that he adorned to make the administration serve the society better and effectively. He was the Home Secretary, and his advice on protection of Babri Masjid was not accepted by the central government. He had the courage to put in the papers immediately. Thereafter, he devoted his entire period thereafter in writing books on number of political and administrative issues. Sujata Tai, once a professor of French, also contributed in her own way by translating a number of books in Marathi, particularly for the children. I will always cherish the few meetings that I had with late Mr. Madhavrao and Sujata Tai, a very fine, cultured couple. I am very much missing Madhavrao on this occasion. I dedicate my lecture to his memory. It is also a great honor to speak at this institute, which is named after Gopal Krishna Gokhale, a great Bharat Sevak. As you all know, apart from being a freedom fighter, he made a valuable contribution to the economic and political thought through his speeches and writings. I pay my tribute to this illustrious son of India. This year, we have completed 75 years of our independence. Our Prime Minister at the time of independence, Jawaharlal Nehru, referred to the tryst with destiny that was made long years ago and gaining independence and future challenges and achievements which beckoned India. Father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, who lived in the Bhangi colony of Delhi at that time, wished to wipe out every tear from every eye. There was, however, one skeptic and realist who had questioned long back what Congress and Gandhi had done for the untouchables. That was Dr. Ambedkar. Apart from his concern for the welfare of Indians in general and Hindu women in particular, which is reflected in his efforts to bring the Hindu Code Bill, he was particularly conscious and disturbed at the ill treatment, deprivation, and discrimination suffered by those considered as untouchables. This discrimination he had himself suffered and wanted to pull out the depressed people from the darkness to light. Fortunately, he got the opportunity as the chairman of drafting committee of Indian Constitution to make necessary provisions for the upliftment of the depressed classes. Our Constitution assured to secure to all its citizens justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Dr. Ambedkar claimed that he derived these principles from the Buddhist thoughts and not from the French Revolution. It is fraternity which is most relevant for the depressed classes to attain the dignity as individuals. What could Dr. Ambedkar do in that behalf? What was his vision for India in the context of fraternity? And what were the means to achieve it as suggested by him? Dr. Ambedkar's contribution, apart from being a political leader, is in different walks of life. But it is only on the issue of fraternity that I am going to address in this lecture. To what extent did the constitutional reforms brought about by him succeed? That is going to be the mainstay of my presentation, and for that purpose, I am going to dwell on 3 articles of Indian Constitution, that is Article 17, Article 313, and Article 16(4), which are concerning non-discrimination, representation, and empowerment. These 3 ideas were dearest to the heart of Dr. Ambedkar. He was clear in his mind that the depressed classes suffered due to discrimination, that is denial of civil rights in all respects, non-representation in governing bodies, and lack of empowerment in the matter of education and employment. He therefore thought that by constitutional measures, we may reduce the inequality and bring about a better status to the depressed classes. Fraternity implies a fellow feeling, a sense of which is necessary for gaining nationhood, which could not be otherwise attained. The legal measures were only steps to move towards that. Dr. Ambedkar, now, but before I go to these 3 articles, as far as Dr. Ambedkar's own life is concerned, how he came to these ideas and how he tried to persuade the other members of the Constituent Assembly and to accept such ideas. Well, as far as his own life is concerned, you all know that he had gone to United States for higher studies on a scholarship given by Maharaja of Baroda. On coming back, as per the terms of his scholarship, he came to Baroda for service. He was ill-treated by people who were subordinate to him. People who were not much educated used to throw files to him. He could not get proper accommodation, which he should have got. This frustrated him, and he left Baroda and came back to Bombay for legal practice. Now here also, when he was at the bar, he suffered discrimination. Once he wanted to drink water, he was thirsty, but he was told that the earthen pot is not meant for the untouchables. This was the beginning of his thinking as to why this discrimination even matters like drinking water. And this led to the movement at Mahad, about which many of you must be aware. The Bombay Provincial Council had passed a resolution to open the ponds and public places to all people. Mahad municipality also had passed a similar resolution, but that was not being implemented. And so, with his supporters and some persons from the supposed to be higher caste, like Surbanana Tipnis and Palya Shastri, in 1927, he launched the agitation for going to the particular pond. The visitors were attacked. Ambedkar filed a complaint against the attackers under section 323 of Indian Penal Code. 5 persons were convicted. They went in appeal. The appeal was also dismissed. But that was not all. A suit was filed against Dr. Ambedkar and others to seek an injunction restraining them from seeking water from that very lake. That suit had evidence was led from both sides. And something interesting, B.T. Kher was one of the witnesses for Dr. Ambedkar. And B.T. Kher's statue is there in the university campus. He was the one who saw to it that the Pune University gets good chunk of land when he was the chief minister, then called as Prime Minister of Bombay province. That suit was dismissed. Appeal was carried to district court, then to the second appeal to the High Court. For 10 years, this litigation went on. And Justice Broomfield and Justice Wadia of Bombay High Court on 17th March 1937 dismissed all those proceedings, decided in favor of Dr. Ambedkar. Now, this was his personal experience. Similar things were happening all over India. As you know, in Kerala at Vaikom, there was an agitation concerning right of way in front of a temple. There was a Mahadev temple, and the untouchables were not allowed even to walk in front of that temple. Periyar, Narayan Guru, and even Gandhiji participated in that agitation for more than a year. And then the rulers of Travancore allowed those people only to walk in front of temple. You know about the Pandharpur Satyagraha of Sani Guruji. That was in 1947. After a 10 days fast, that temple was opened for all communities. Now, something that followed thereafter is very interesting. The Bombay province passed an act, Bombay Harijan Temple Entry Act 1947, again when B.G. Kher was the Chief Minister of Bombay. That act applied to the old state of Bombay, which had the districts of Western Maharashtra and districts of Gujarat. There was one gentleman, Muldas Sundardas Vaishya, in Ahmedabad. He was a follower of Sardar Patel. Something which you do not know, probably some of you might be knowing, these Swaminarayan temples were not allowing the Harijans to enter the temples. So Muldraj Vaishya announced that now I am going to enter this temple because this act is passed. Swami Yajna Purush Das Ji of that temple filed a suit against Muldraj Vaishya, similar to the one which was filed against Dr. Ambedkar, seeking an injunction that he should not be allowed to enter into this temple. And the plea taken was that followers of Swaminarayan faith are not Hindus. That was the plea taken in that suit. Suit was dismissed by the trial court, matter carried to the Bombay High Court, dismissed, appealed to the Supreme Court. And the judgment given by Justice Gajendra Gadkar, where he referred to the definition of Hindu given by Lokmanya Tilak, Monier Williams. By that time, the definition which appeared in various Hindu enactments, those were referred. And then he held that, well, this cannot be. Hindu is a wide concept. It includes all these various faiths. Now, one very interesting fallout of this judgment was that this judgment was used by a political leader from Maharashtra who canvassed in election on the basis of Hinduism to contend that Hinduism is a wide concept and therefore nothing wrong if I canvass on that basis in an election. Surprisingly enough, the plea was accepted by bench in the Supreme Court. And now, those who propagate those ideas rely upon that judgment and say that nothing wrong if we say, गर्व से कहो हम हिंदू है, even during election time, which is otherwise not permissible under the Representation of People's Act. Now, and this judgment was of course criticized by persons like Justice Tarkunde and many others, but the judgment still holds good. Now, while drafting our constitution and concluding the draft and presenting to the Constituent Assembly on 25th November 1949, as far as fraternity is concerned, this is what Dr. Ambedkar said. In India, there are castes. The castes are anti-national. In the first place, because they bring about separation in social life. They are anti-national, also because they generate jealousy and antipathy between castes and castes. But we must overcome all these difficulties if we wish to become a nation in reality. For fraternity can be a fact only when there is a nation. Without fraternity, equality and liberty will be no deeper than coats of paint. Now, coming to the first of the three articles on which I am going to dwell, namely Article 17 and then the subsequent fallout thereafter. Article 17, which abolished untouchability, said untouchability is abolished and its practice in any form is forbidden. The enforcement of any disability arising out of untouchability shall be an offense punishable in accordance with law. So therefore, a law had to be passed, and that law was passed during the lifetime of Dr. Ambedkar. That was the Protection of Civil Rights Act 1955. The statement and objects of reasons of this act stated that it was not possible to define untouchability. And therefore, under the scheme of the act, express provisions were made with respect to common forms of untouchability, and some punishment was also provided. One important aspect of the act was that it was not confined to Hindus only. Passing of the act, however, had no effect. The unexpected and improper practices continued. Provisions of the Civil Rights Act and normal provisions of the Penal Code were found to be inadequate, and therefore, much later, the Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act was passed in 1989, what is known as the Atrocities Act. Now, on this act, you find the court moving forward and backward. There are judgments one way, and then there are judgments the other way. This act, under Section 3, defines some 15 objectionable activities in the first part, such as making a member of SC/ST to drink obnoxious and inedible substances, removing clothes and parading naked, forcibly occupying land, fouling source of water, humiliating in various ways, etc. Now, one important provision of this act, on which there is a lot of litigation, is Section 18, which states that Section 438 of the Criminal Procedure Code on anticipatory bail will not apply to the case concerning the arrest of a person who is accused of having committed an offense under the Act. This has led to a number of judgments. Now, one of the first important cases which came up was Dr. S.K. Mahajan versus State of Maharashtra in 2018. This was an interesting case. This S.K. Mahajan was head of a department in a pharmacy college. One of the subordinates of Dr. Mahajan had approved an adverse entry against a scheduled caste employee. That entry was approved by Dr. Mahajan, and because he had approved that entry, 5 years thereafter, a complaint was filed against him. Now, the facts were obviously gross. And the matter went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, well, you just can't pick up something which happened 5 years ago, and this gentleman is only approving the entry, and then you are prosecuting him. He should be entitled to an anticipatory bail. But the court did not stop at that. The court laid down certain guidelines which again created problems. Those guidelines were like this, that a preliminary inquiry must be conducted by a DSP when any such complaint is filed, whether a case is made out. The DSP must give reasons, and those reasons must be scrutinized by a magistrate before permitting further detention of the person concerned. Now, this created an uproar because if such procedure was to be applied in every case, immediate arrest, even in cases of serious atrocities, will not be possible. These conditions were therefore again removed by the court in a subsequent case, Union of India versus State of Maharashtra, a review in 2020. Central government also brought in Section 18A under that act, which said, well, such conditions are not permissible. But again, one more matter came before the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court said, well, where there are unjustified cases, anticipatory bail can be granted. So therefore, well, what happens in a particular case will always depend upon the facts of the case. But the provision, as it remains, well, is under doubt. Now, one of the methods which was employed against the untouchables was to ostracize them. Now, as far as ostracizing is concerned, well, that became impermissible after Article 17 was brought in the Constitution. But ostracizing is not a method practiced by Hindus alone. In the Dawoodi Bohra community of Muslims, this is permissible. The Sayyidina has a power to ostracize somebody who does not accept his dictate. Now, again, going back to the times of B.J. Kher, the Bombay Provincial Council passed an act, Bombay Prevention of Excommunication Act, in 1949. One Tayebhai Musaji was ostracized. He filed a suit in the Bombay High Court against Sayyidina, saying that this act is passed, I can't be ostracized. A single judge of the Bombay High Court, Justice J.C. Shah, as he then was, he granted him an injunction. Sayyidina carried an appeal to a division bench of Bombay High Court. Justice Chagla and Justice Bhagwati dismissed that appeal, said in view of this act, you can't ostracize anybody. Sayyidina carried the appeal to the Supreme Court, and a bench of 5 judges, with the Chief Justice Sinha dissenting, held that the act was unconstitutional. It violated Article 25(2) on freedom of religion and Article 26(b), providing for freedom to a religious denomination to manage its own affairs. That law continues to operate as far as Sayyidina and the Bohra community. For them, this law continues to operate. But now, such practices are there in other communities also. The nomadic tribes like Kanjar Bhat, Dawri Gosavi, Kashi Kapdi in Maharashtra, they follow these practices. So therefore, in view of the agitation by Dr. Narendra Dabholkar and many others, Maharashtra legislature recently passed an act, Maharashtra Protection of People from Social Boycott, Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2016. It was unfortunately passed after the murder of Dr. Dabholkar. Another act was passed, Maharashtra Prevention and Eradication of Human Sacrifice and Other Inhuman, Evil, Aghori Practices and Black Magic Act in 2013, which we may call as Prevention of Black Magic Act. But it is the Prevention of Social Boycott Act, which has now again led the reformists in the Bohra community to approach the Supreme Court, saying that the earlier judgment should be reviewed and the matter is pending in the Supreme Court. Thereafter, number of enactments have been passed as far as the civil rights are concerned. Protection of Human Rights Act 1993. Under that act, state commissions, central commissions are appointed to look into violations of human rights. They make reports to the assemblies, to the parliament. They only read them or they do not read. We do not know. But we do not know what happens to those reports when they are made to the parliament or the state assembly. Now, have all these progressive measures succeeded? As we have seen, after Article 17, various acts have been passed. But the reports of the National Crime Records Bureau give shocking statistics. In 2014, there were more than 47,000 incidents of atrocities against Dalits. In 2016, the number was still above 40,000. The figures of 2019, 2020 and 2021 were 45,961, 50,291 and 50,900. These are the figures which are quoted from a recent Supreme Court judgment. And this is apart from the fact that a number of complaints are not even registered by the police. And such incidents continue. Dalits not being allowed to take water, bridegrooms not allowed to ride horses, burning their houses, women being raped and paraded naked. These are some of the incidents which continue to happen. Even in Maharashtra, in spite of movements like Ek Gaon and Ek Panotha, well, things continue to be bleak. And as far as women are concerned, well, denial of entry at Shani Shingnapur, Haji Ali, and to the menstruing women at Sabarimala in Kerala. These are instances of discrimination against women. Now, this attitude of discrimination against the Dalits is not confined to India. It is a subcontinental phenomenon. It is there in Bangladesh and in Pakistan also. As I have recently visited Bangladesh, in my book, I have written a chapter regarding the necessity of reform of Hindu law in Bangladesh, for which the organizations, some of them over there, are working. Something interesting, some of you might be knowing, districts of Khulna and Jessore, which are part of East Bengal, they were the districts which elected Dr. Ambedkar to the Constituent Assembly of India, undivided India. Thereafter, partition took place, and because of partition, Dr. Ambedkar's membership lapsed. Now, luckily it so happened that Barrister Jaikar, who became the first Vice Chancellor of Pune University, he was a member of Constituent Assembly, and because he was being made Vice Chancellor of the university, he resigned his membership of the Constituent Assembly. And it was on that seat that Dr. Ambedkar was again got elected to the Constituent Assembly due to the intervention of Sardar Patel and blessings of Mahatma Gandhi. Now therefore, today what we have is, in Bangladesh, there is no reform in Hindu law. There is no protection to women as far as provisions like divorce, maintenance, etc., protection against domestic violence, nothing of the kind. There are no such laws. And as far as Dalit women are concerned, their conditions are equally worse, still worse. There are communities like Matuas and Kauras, Rovidas, who have migrated from Uttar Pradesh over the years, Harijans who have migrated from Andhra Pradesh. There are Santals who have migrated from Bihar. And Bangladesh Constitution under Article 19, Sub-Article 2 declares that states shall adopt effective measures to remove social and economic inequality for the benefit of men and women. But nothing has been done as far as the Hindu law in Bangladesh is concerned. Now, some organizations are taking up these issues. Well, let us hope they succeed someday. The condition of Dalits in Pakistan is worse. The Meghwal community is engaged in the work of sweeping and cleaning in Western India. They hail from Gujarat, but they are the people who are doing this work in Western Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan, and in Sindh. Now it so happened that when partition took place, Hindus started migrating to India, including these Meghwals from Sindh. And problem came up for Karachi because who is going to clean the city if these people migrate? That was one of the reasons which led, amongst other reasons, to the Nehru and Liaquat Ali Pact in April 1950, which said that, well, we'll grant protection to the minorities. Pakistan's constitution under Article 20 extends right to profess, practice and propagate one's religion to all religions, all communities. But you know what is happening to the Hindus, Sikhs and Christians in Pakistan. Now a report has been made by the International Dalit Solidarity Network on the condition of Dalits in Pakistan. They include the Hindus, Dalit Hindus in Sindh and Christians in Punjab who are converted from Hinduism to Christianity. They are the people who work for sanitation, as bonded laborers in the brick cleaning, making work and in agriculture. The condition of Dalit women is worse for being non-Muslims, Dalits and then women. And those cases are reported. Some of the organizations and some members in Parliament of Pakistan are working, but then without much effect. Now, what is the basis of this attitude of high caste Hindus and Muslims towards the Dalit? I'm including Muslim because they also treat the Dalits, and most of the Muslims in the subcontinent are converts from Hinduism and carry the same practices. What is the attitude? What is the basis of this attitude towards the Dalits? Many social scientists and activists, and Dr. Ambedkar also, were of the view that the Hindu law book, Manusmriti, was the source for all this ill treatment. Well, there are many such edicts in Manusmriti. Shlok 91 of Part 1 states that God has stipulated that the role of Shudras is to serve the persons of higher Varnas. Shlok 31 Part 2 states that the name of a Brahmin should be showing purity, that of a Kshatriya showing strength, that of a Vaishya showing his property, and that of a Shudra should be condemnable. Shlok 156 Part 3 provides for a punishment to a Shudra if he tries to take education. Shlok 4 Part 12 states that if a Shudra listens to Vedas, hot oil be poured into his ears. And if he utters stanzas of Vedas, his tongue be removed. And if he becomes an expert in Vedas, his body be cut to pieces. These are only some of the edicts of Manusmriti. No wonder that Dr. Ambedkar burned Manusmriti during his agitation in 1927 at Mahad. Intercaste marriages involving a Dalit is one particular category which has led to heinous crimes, even disregarding the protection given by court. One of the cases which came up before the Supreme Court and before my bench was that a couple wherein one of them was a Dalit got married. They were granted protection by a court and they were going to Chandigarh, and on way to Chandigarh, they were pulled down from the vehicle and killed. In Tamil Nadu, an incident has happened, and this is not confined only to some of the higher castes. Even the so-called middle castes also are indulging to this. A young Dalit boy married to a Thevar girl, given protection by the Madras High Court, going home, was within a short time found dead on the railway track. Some of you must have seen the Marathi film Sairat. There also, you know what has happened at the end of the film. Now, Bhagavad Gita, which most of us have respect for that Grantha. Well, it has many good things in that. It teaches how one should behave in the society. It tells us how we must have a dispassionate attitude in difficult situations. It inspired many of our freedom fighters, and many of the great people like Lokmanya Tilak have written commentaries on Bhagavad Gita. But then 13th stanza of chapter 4 states that the fourfold Varna system was created by the God himself. And it is on that basis that a differentiation in guna and karma has been made. Why is this document written? Arjuna, who is going to the war, he is a Kshatriya. He is seeking guidance from Sri Krishna, who is a Yadav. Arjuna says that I am not going to go to war. No, I don't want to go to the battlefield. I see my relatives, Kauravas on the other side. He feels that he has lost control over his limbs. Stanza 21 of the first chapter, Siddhanti Muma Gatrani. And while giving the reasons why not to go to the war, Arjuna says in para 40 to 44 that war will bring about decay in the family, leading to impurity. The woman will become corrupt, leading to intermingling of caste. Varna Sankara is something Arjuna is worried about. Admixture of caste will lead to destruction of family rituals, and landing in hell is inevitable to such men. All these edicts are perhaps behind such ideas opposing intercaste marriages. Dr. Ambedkar was critical of Gandhiji, since Gandhiji did not criticize Varnashram system. But at the same time, one must see Gandhiji's conduct. Gandhiji insisted on everyone, including his wife, on cleaning the toilets, which is the work of an untouchable person in his time. He supported the intercaste marriages so much so that he refused to attend the marriage which was not an intercaste marriage. Narayan Bhai Desai, son of Mahadev Bhai, who was Gandhiji's secretary, he married a Brahmin girl, though from Odisha, daughter of Navakrishna Chaudhary. Gandhiji refused to bless that marriage. He went to Madurai on number of occasions, but never entered the temple, Meenakshi temple, until it was opened to all communities. When he went to Odisha and his wife wanted to visit, Kasturba wanted to visit Jagannath temple, Gandhiji said, please don't go over there because it is not open to others. Now the survey of all these relevant legal provisions, the historical background, role of Gandhiji, role of Ambedkar, when we look into that, still we find with all that the discrimination continues. In spite of all these provisions and efforts, atrocities continue to occur, pointing out that we have a long way to go. To eradicate this menace of discrimination, we need a change of mindset. For that, we need both Ambedkar and Gandhi. Ambedkar for the theoretical approach to the problem, and Gandhi for the empathy, understanding, and conduct that we must adopt. While Ambedkar preferred a right-based approach, Gandhiji's approach was based on faith, spirituality, and persuasion. That takes me to the second article, second subject, which was taken by Dr. Ambedkar. That was representation to the depressed classes. The Government of India Act 1919, passed by the British Parliament, provided limited self-government to the Indians. The right to vote was restricted only to those who owned lands, houses, or property and having education. The depressed classes hardly had those qualifications and they were not eligible to vote. The Simon Commission, which came in November 1927 to review the implementation of 1919 Act, Indian National Congress boycotted it, but the All India Depressed Classes Congress, under the leadership of Dr. Ambedkar, welcomed that commission in Nagpur 1930 and demanded, amongst others, adequate representation to the depressed classes. The second roundtable conference in London, Dr. Ambedkar insisted on separate electorate for the untouchables. He argued that, well, you are accepting separate electorate for the Muslims. Why not for the untouchables? Lucknow Pact, which was entered into between Lokmanya Tilak and Jinnah prior thereto, in 1916, Congress had agreed for a separate electorate for the Muslims. So Congress could not oppose a separate position for the Muslims, but it opposed a separate electorate for the scheduled castes, saying they were part of Hindu society and therefore no separate representation should be permitted. But the British Prime Minister Macdonald gave what was known as communal award. He granted this request of Dr. Ambedkar, and a separate representation for the depressed classes was accepted. Gandhiji went on fast in Pune against that decision. Gandhiji's life was at stake, and then Dr. Ambedkar relented and accepted a common electorate, as a result of which, well, there will be a common constituency. Some constituencies will be there for the scheduled castes and others will be for the open categories. The pact was signed on 24th September 1932 between Madan Mohan Malviya, representing Congress, and Dr. Ambedkar on the other side. The Indian Constitution accepted this provision, and therefore the Representation of People's Act has a similar provision. Now, in our parliament, we have 84 seats reserved for the scheduled castes, 47 for the scheduled tribes. Candidates for these seats have to be from particular category, though voters will be from any community. Dr. Ambedkar realized that this will not get good representatives elected. He himself was defeated in 1952 in an election and also in a by-election. Well, he said that, well, what I have agreed was not something contemplated, but it could not be undone, and that system will continue to operate. But at the same time, the open category people, citizens, they make a grievance. Why my constituency is all the time reserved for the scheduled caste or for the scheduled tribe? Why it is not being opened up? So there are issues from both sides. Well, but at the same time, it must be accepted that it is only due to the efforts of Dr. Ambedkar that in our legislatures we have the representatives to the marginalized sections of society which otherwise would not have happened. Now coming to the third issue, which has recently become very controversial, namely about the empowerment of the weaker sections of the society. Granting representation in parliament would not be enough if there are no rights for education and for employment. And therefore, Article 16 of the Constitution, which provided for equality of opportunity in the matter of public employment, had a specific separate article, sub-article 4, which said that the state will have the authority to provide for reservation in posts in favor of backward classes if they are not adequately represented. Same principle was later on extended for promotions, and then in Article 15(5) in 2006, we brought in a special provision for the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and backward classes in the matter of education. Well, this has led to two kinds of reactions. One, of course, originally there was no reservation for the other backward classes, so there was a demand from them. On the other hand, there was an opposition from the open category people. Now, you know, a commission was appointed under Mr. B.P. Mandal. It gave a report in 1980 granting 27% reservation to what is known as the other backward classes. The report was accepted 10 years later. Consequently, you have 49.5% reservation. That reservation was opposed by open category people. It was carried to the Supreme Court, and in Indira Sahni's case in 1993, it was held to be valid. Well, now there has been a demand that the open category people must also have a reservation. And therefore, now you have an amendment to the Constitution, 103rd Amendment, passed in 2019 after the present government came to power, introducing Article 15(6) and 16(6), 10% reservation to the economically weaker section of the open category candidates other than scheduled caste, scheduled tribes and OBC. Now this was contested recently in Supreme Court. Many of you must be aware. And in that, the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and OBC representatives argued that, look, are we not economically weak? Are we to be excluded from this 10% reservation? The other side objected, saying that you already have separate reservation. Why should you have an additional reservation? And those who were economically well off from the open category, they argued that this 10% reservation reduces their scope as far as 50% seats are concerned, because they are being reduced to 40%. So there was a threefold argument before the Supreme Court, and that was decided very recently on the 9th November in Janahit Abhiyan versus Union of India. There were three issues before the court. Firstly, whether reservation exclusively on the basis of economic criterion is valid. Secondly, whether exclusion of SC, ST, OBC was valid. And thirdly, whether this 10% over and above 50%, going above over 50%, whether all these things fit the basic structure of the Constitution. 7th November 2022, by a majority of 3 versus 2, Supreme Court has recently held that this reservation is valid. Now, this has created a number of problems. One does not know how it is going to be reacted by various people. The ruling party in Tamil Nadu and Bihar, both of them are saying that we want a review of this judgment. They are saying that, well, you can't exclude the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, OBCs from the economical weaker section. That matter is going to come up someday, God knows when. There is also issue that there is no quantifiable data, and the limit of 8 lakhs, which is laid down under the government notification, where do you arrive at? And if you say that open category people below 8 lakhs are to be given benefit, why not to the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, OBC? So all these things. And what is argued is that caste is a structural and systematic discrimination. As far as poverty is concerned, it is only a consequence of this discrimination. So all these aspects are going to come up someday or the other. Now, whether it is going to be beneficial or counterproductive, well, only future will tell us. With that, I come to this end of this overview of these 3 articles. Since I am speaking at a time when we have completed 75 years of our independence, I began by referring to the tryst with the destiny referred by our Prime Minister on the first Independence Day. I referred to the desire of Father of Nation to wipe out every tear from every eye. I referred to the efforts made by Dr. Ambedkar, who referred to the weakest sections of the society. I concentrated on 3 aspects: non-discrimination, representation, and empowerment. The idea being going towards fraternity. But then we have to look to the scenario on the background as to where we are today. Utter poverty, inequality, unemployment prevalent in the society, and in which the depressed classes are the most sufferers. The General Secretary of an organization which claims to represent the largest number of Hindus and which supports the present central government has very recently drawn our attention to the fact that whereas 1%, on the one hand, 1% of our population enjoys 20% of our national income. On the other hand, income of 50% of our population is less than 13%. 20 crore people are still below poverty line, and 23 crore people have income of less than 375 per day. In the past, there have been caste wars in Bihar between Ranveer Sena of the Thakurs and the scheduled castes. Now also there are occasional outbursts in the tribal areas between the security forces and the tribals. During the COVID time, we have seen people walking hundreds of miles to their villages and dead bodies floating over river Ganga. The efforts made all these years to bring necessary reform through constitutional process will not succeed if the issues concerning inequality, poverty, hunger and unemployment remain unattended. As stated earlier, in the concluding speech before the Constituent Assembly, Dr. Ambedkar had emphasized fraternity as an essential value for India to become a nation. And fraternity cannot be achieved unless we take urgent steps to remove the disparities in income and status amongst all castes and all communities. Or else, celebrating the 75 years of independence and holding Tiranga Yatras will be reduced to mere formality without any substance and without any assurance for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for such an enlightening session, sir. All of us here are truly privileged to know about such inconspicuous historical events of our nation as well as Dr. Ambedkar's vision. Let us now move on to a brief Q&A session. Please feel free to raise your hands if you have any query.
So you have illustrated all the acts which have been enacted so far since independence, and still the issue has not been resolved. I mean, that is what it appears. I remember one of the very senior police officers, when he was giving a lecture on various aspects of law and how it is being enforced by the police, mentioned that creation of a law really cannot do away with the social evil. It is a society's problems which has to be sorted out by the society. So therefore, how do you agree with this police officer who said that law is not the answer? There is something else which is required.
Yeah. Well, a very good question by Major General Mahajan. Well, law alone can't do everything. He's absolutely right. The police officer who talked to Major General Mahajan. But at the same time, law is also necessary. Because unless you have a law becomes, I hope this is, law is ultimately an instrument which must be available to the person to whom some wrong has been done. If there is no law, then he goes nowhere. See, our society has all these practices and wrong things over the years. Now, they can't vanish suddenly. But if you make a legislation, provide it to the citizen, well, the citizen can utilize it. But then, ultimately, when the matter comes to the court, you have the law and you have the facts of the case. Now, as the question is asked by Major General Mahajan, and the case which I referred was also of one Professor Mahajan. Well, with respect to Atrocities Act. Well, 5 years after an incident, he was being prosecuted. Well, this is something unacceptable. But then if the court lays down wider guidelines, it creates problems. And therefore, as I said, a subsequent judgment also came up. And then a third judgment also came up. Now this process goes on. And of course, every matter is decided on the facts and on the law. But there is some unexpressed underlining. That is the view of the judge concerned. Well, on which I don't want to say anything since I was myself a judge. So depending on that, well, decisions sometimes go one way or the other. The law is required. The answer to Major General Mahajan's question is the law is required.
If there are any other queries, please. Yes, sir.
Hello, sir. Sir, could you please tell us about?
Can't hear.
Sir, could you please tell us something about Article 370 and Dr. Ambedkar's views? 370.
Hello.
Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes, you have asked me on Article 370, which is concerning Kashmir. That is not the subject of my speech. So I refrain from saying on that. Because if I have to answer you, I will have to study it a little more deeply, and which I have not done as of now for today's lecture.
All right.
You referred that the fraternity word has been taken from the Buddhist philosophy, and I have also read somewhere that it is taken from the French Revolution. Can you distinguish between the? Hello, sir. You said that the word fraternity in our constitution is taken from the Buddhist philosophy, whereas I have read somewhere that it is from the French Revolution also.
No, I have said it while speaking just now. Dr. Ambedkar himself claimed that not merely fraternity, the whole idea of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity, he has taken from the Buddhist thoughts and not from the French Revolution. That was his view. Well,
can you distinguish between the two? What is the basic difference between of the French and the Buddhist philosophy?
French Revolution and
use of the word fraternity in the two philosophies?
No, they say, again, my answer will be, I am not a student of Buddhism. And, but the fact is that Buddha very much emphasized fraternity, love for the mankind, all persons. Why did Dr. Ambedkar, why was he attracted to Buddhism? Basically because Buddhism was one, religion which opposed all these kind of discriminations. And so therefore, and that is what Dr. Ambedkar himself is saying, that I have taken these concepts from Buddhist thoughts. Now, French Revolution, of course, definitely, these ideas did come up from the French Revolution. So, but then that was his view. And he's entitled, he's very much entitled to his view.
Thank you, sir. Sir, do you see this EWS reservation have only future consequences, or does it have potential to change some part of history also? And how do you see, does this shakes the basic structure of constitution?
On economic EWS reservation. Yes. Well, you see, this EWS reservation, you have seen the Supreme Court, the bench was split 3 versus 2. And you see, any amendment which is brought to the constitution, the parliament, we must refer to the government in power. Well, it has its own ideas, it has its own reasons, it has its own justification. And as far as this 103rd amendment is concerned, when it was passed in 2019, there was hardly any opposition in the parliament. When the discussion took place, there was hardly any. And most people thought that, well, what is wrong in giving 10% reservation to the economically weaker section from the open category? But when it came to the court, there was the other counter view. Then how do you exclude these people? So, and there are consequences now. As I pointed out, the ruling party in Tamil Nadu and ruling party in Bihar, they have opposed this. They are going for a review in the Supreme Court. Now, review, one doesn't know what will happen, because again the same arguments will be made. How the bench will be there, who will be the members, what view they have. So all those. But then there are consequences. See, on the one hand, there is a large section which supports this. We say that, well, as far as the poor people from the so-called higher communities, why should they not be helped? But then those who are having better income amongst the open category, they are also opposing this 10%, saying that, well, by giving this 10% to this, you are reducing our quota to 40%. So there are, and then what happens is this goes into politics. You see, now, as far as Mandal Commission report is concerned, the present ruling party, when the report came, very much opposed it. Now it supports it. So one doesn't know what will happen. One has to see. I mean, these things. But then you see what happens is caste is a very volatile kind of issue. And now there are demands in different states. In Maharashtra, you are aware that different communities are demanding additional representation for them. There is some similar demand in other states. And now there is also demand for caste census. There is a serious demand for caste census. In the 100% population, you must find out how many persons are belonging to each caste. And now, if that is accepted, I'm not saying it should be or it should not be. The next demand will be that reservation should be based on that. So one has to see. We have to wait and. Okay. Yes, sorry.
Initially, I was a supporter of reservation because there was a great crying need to uplift the downtrodden scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other lower castes. But if you look at the situation today, it seems that the successive generations of these people are still availing of this facility. And a son of a IAS officer from the scheduled caste or president of India from the lower caste, his son or his children, they also claim this facility. So a lot of these reservations are being cornered by the creamy layer among these people. I don't know whether serious changes of law are necessary so that the people who really need it among these scheduled caste, scheduled tribes are able to avail of this facility, and this is not cornered by the creamy layer who actually don't need it anymore. Thank you.
Well, as far as OBCs are concerned, there is this provision of creamy layer. So as far as OBCs are concerned, they do not get the benefit if they belong to the creamy layer. As far as SC, STs are concerned, there is no such provision. Now, well, this view is being canvassed by some people that, well, you restrict the benefit for one generation or maybe two. One doesn't, but then it is ultimately for the parliament to decide what should be done, and it's not going to be very easy. It's not, and ultimately everything has a political impact. How much this will help me or damage in terms of votes? That is the thinking of the political, parties. So one doesn't. I'm not saying I don't have a view one way or the other, but this is something which has to be considered someday.
We apologize as we are running out of time. This will be our last question for the session.
Sir, you spoke about the ill practices against the depressed communities in all religions. You gave example of Christians and Muslims in Bangladesh and Pakistan also. That means all these practices, despite all laws, despite Article 17 and the many laws and cases which we discussed, that means that is not restricted to any religion. So do you think that to eradicate all these things and bring some uniformity and sanity to society, the common civil code will help in any way?
One doesn't
take both the questions together.
Yeah,
We can take both the questions at once. Please raise your query, sir.
Sir, thank you very much. I have no question as such, but whatever I heard from your well-experienced speech, it has helped us to enlighten our knowledge and removed many doubts from us.
within a schedule and very in a decent manner, in a properly framework. I am very happy to listen, keeping aside all the assignment at 11 o'clock. We reach here. Thank you very much.
Anyway, thank you, sir, for your compliments. Now, okay. Now, the question asked by this gentleman was about the common civil code. Now, see, common civil code will not solve this problem. This is a problem essentially, you see, arising out of our ideas, mainly in the Hindu community, and which are also prevalent amongst the Muslims and the Christians. Because now scheduled caste converts to Christianity, and some of the communities among the Muslims, which are supposed to be the lower communities among the Muslims, they are also demanding reservation. Now, a common civil code will not be answer to that. Civil law, basically concerning marriage, succession, and other things, is an aspect which will be governed by a common civil code if it is passed. But that's a different thing. That has nothing to do with the issues which are concerning discrimination based on caste, which is there among the Hindus, among the Muslims, among the Christians, and among the Sikhs also, incidentally. Among the Sikhs also. And also you find those things happening in Pakistan and Bangladesh as well, because they are part of British India. And those practices, so that's a different thing. Civil code is a separate issue. Thank you for your.
Truly a wonderful session, I'll say. Now I would like to request our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Ajit Ranade, Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, to present their kind remarks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll take about, hopefully not more than 5-7 minutes. So Justice Hemant Gokhale, our chief guest and speaker for today, Ambassador Mangalmurthy, Air Marshal Gokhale, and Major General Majan, dignitaries in the audience, especially the three children of Mr. Kogekar, Mr. Umrani, and many others in the audience. Good afternoon to you. I'm simply actually delighted that we had Justice Hemant Gokhale speak today on the occasion of the Kogekar Memorial Lecture. And as he said, we are also really missing Mr. Madhav Gokhale today. So thank you for paying a tribute to him as well, Justice Gokhale. I want to say a few things by way of remarks over today's lecture. So, he covered, it's not a summary of the lecture because it was really an outstanding lecture, but I'll just, some takeaways that I want to highlight, at least from my perspective. You touched, Dr. Ambedkar's you chose to dwell on 3 sections or articles of India's constitution. And they are very much relevant even today, after 75 years of independence. And you chose them, I guess, because Dr. Ambedkar is known, at least in contemporary India or among the younger people, as the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution, or perhaps somebody who was very key to drafting our Constitution. And unfortunately, among many people, he has been reduced to be a representative or icon of a Dalit leader. But that is really absolutely unfair to the great personality. Let me remind you, for those of you who may not know, his early training and thorough training was actually in economics. He's probably the most accomplished trained economist from the earlier part of this century. He got not 1 but 2 PhDs in economics, one from Columbia University, which is an Ivy League university in the USA, and the other from London School of Economics, 2 independent PhDs. The London School of Economics thesis, in fact, has become a book which has been even recognized in Cambridge. And he covered in those 2 theses and early writings on various issues which have relevance even today. For example, currency management, the management of monetary policy. We are fighting inflation today, but Dr. Ambedkar had writings on these topics back then. Or federalism, fiscal federalism. The question of consolidation of land. Today, we have 141 million land fragments in the country. And every successive generation, 55% of India's population is still related or dependent directly or indirectly on agriculture. And farmers are unable to leave the land or unable to leave farming. And every successive generation, there is further fragmentation of land because the next generation has to be split up. So what used to be 60, 70 million parcels of land 40, 50 years ago has become 140 million parcels. But this question was addressed by Dr. Ambedkar back in 1914 or something. 14. So you can see that actually Dr. Ambedkar, we talk about, your entire talk, of course, very rightfully was focused on what I would consider as the issues that he tackled later in his life. But let's not forget that till 1920, he was one of the most accomplished economists, not just in India, but perhaps internationally. And this has been recognized by international scholars. However, I think he stopped writing on economics after 1920. There is no further writing on economics from Dr. Ambedkar after 1920, possibly because of the incidents that you have recounted. And to this, as I said, to this day, I am really amazed that in the late 21st century, we are still passing acts like Black Magic Act and Superstition Act and Andhashraddha Nirmulan Act. This is 2014, 2018, and he referred to. So, much work still remains to be done despite the towering personalities of Dr. Ambedkar and Gandhi. So your talk is absolutely relevant in that context. The other thing I wanted to mention, and just my remarks are really a little disparate. They are not well organized. Please bear with me. Justice Gokhale said perhaps we need to do a caste census. Indeed, sir, a socio-economic caste census was conducted in 2012, I think. It has not, the content of that caste census has not been made public. It is with the government, and there is a suspicion that it is being used, but it is not in the public domain. But some news items and some reports say that census has reported 47 lakh castes in India. So you can imagine what a Pandora's box it will open if you start, tackling this issue of caste reservation and so on. So caste census is required, but I don't know, by just knowing whose caste is how much, whether we are going to, live with a country of 47 lakh castes or whatever, or even 1 lakh castes. So no doubt we need to go in that direction. I must remind people that there are countries in the world today, like Cuba, which have stopped from the very beginning, perhaps from 50, 60 years ago, of doing any racial or ethnic-based census. So there is something to think about. Caste census. The other, you touched on 3 articles. One was basically about non-discrimination. Second was about representation. And third was about empowerment. Very important, very relevant, very salient even today. In representation, a little bit tidbit, Justice Gokhale, in the previous parliamentary elections, I think 2019, there was one party which actually has been formed on the basis of representing Dalits or untouchables, or what used to be called the depressed classes during Dr. Ambedkar's time. And this is a regional party. No, this is a national party. That party received 20% of the vote share in the state of Uttar Pradesh, 20%, but 0 MPs. Out of 80 members of parliament, Uttar Pradesh sends the maximum number of members of parliament from one state, which is 80 out of 543, 80. Despite getting 20% of the vote share of the votes cast, that party was not able to get even a single member of parliament. So you can imagine how big the challenge is. So you go back to the Pune Pact, and we are in the same city, and when the signing of the Pune Pact happened, just before that, he had to come from Mumbai to Pune because he refused to even meet Gandhiji. And he said, I am the most hated man in India. It is his own writing, because he became the villain of refusing to sign that Pune Pact. And because he felt that a separate electorate is necessary at that time. And it was almost, I mean, I don't know what is the right word to say, but basically emotional blackmail. They said that you will be responsible for the death of Gandhi. Of course, somebody else became responsible for the death of Gandhi later. And because of that, he relented, capitulated, and signed that Pune Pact. And it has been not only subsequently, like you said, 1952, you said he lost the election, the first India's parliamentary election. He stood from, I think, Andheri or the other, Central Bombay, the other area. So it's not only that he lost the election, that doesn't tell you. He didn't even come number 2, not even number 3. He came number 4. So therefore, it was embarrassing, and they had to put him in parliament somehow. So they had a by-election. Somebody resigned from the seat, and they had a by-election. And the by-election also he lost. And then a Rajya Sabha membership, I think. And then, of course, unfortunately, he died in so he didn't live long to. But that is, so what he said, I don't want to say it's a prophecy, but even in 2019, this proportional representation, SC, ST reservations and all, the 0 seats for Bahujan Samaj Party. I'm not a votary, or I'm not trying to say anything about whether I support or don't support Bahujan Samaj Party, but this is a reality of the micromanagement of electioneering, which is 24/7 in India today for the last many years. And this is about the fragmentation created by the first past the post system. If you have a constituent election, if 50% people only vote, on average in India 50 to 55% vote. In that 50%, if there is a 4-way contest, if 4 candidates think that all of them are strong, then 50 divided by 4 is 12.5. So if somebody gets 13 or 14% of the vote, you win. If only 14% of the people have voted for you, that means 86% people did not vote for you, and still you become member of parliament. So it's not surprising. And incidentally, when people become member of parliament, they forget they're representing the constituency. They don't represent the party anymore. They don't represent the people who voted for them, those 14%. Once you become a member of parliament, you are somebody representing the entire constituency, entire 100%. But people forget that. It's still party loyalty. So I'm just saying that Pune Pact, I mean, I don't know, there's so much heartburn about it. I'm not saying it, I mean, we can't undo history, but often we have to learn from it. I also wanted to mention that you said that it was this in Khulna. So, while you mentioned 1989 and the Mandal Commission and the fact that we have OBC reservation thanks to the agitation. Incidentally, Mandal Commission was set up, I think, by Mrs. Indira Gandhi as Prime Minister. And during Morarji Desai's time. Yeah, I know, but it was, the commission's report was ready and kept somewhere, and very cleverly or prudently or very discreetly, many prime ministers chose to just keep it on the shelf, maybe eating dust or I don't know. And then one prime minister chose to bring it out after 10, 12 years, and then the Pandora's box was opened again. So we talk about this BP Mandal you mentioned, who was the chairman of that commission. But let us also remember another Mandal, which is Jogendranath Mandal, because Dr. Ambedkar, who almost did not make it to the Constituent Assembly, to become the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution, you have to first be elected to the Constituent Assembly. Incidentally, Constituent Assembly, some of the debates happened right here in Gokhale Institute campus, in the Servants of India Society hall. A lot of debates happened here. So Dr. Ambedkar could not even make an entry into the Constituent Assembly because the Congress party was fiercely opposed to it. Because the caste Hindus or Muslim, I don't know, were fiercely opposed. He was the most hated man in India, remember, 1926. So it was Jogendranath Mandal from Calcutta, from Bengal, with the support of the undivided India, which is East Pakistan and became Bangladesh, and with the support of the Muslim League. With the support of the Muslim League, it was only possible to get Ambedkar elected into the Constituent Assembly thanks to Bengal. So we have to be grateful to Bengal. Bengal also gave us Vivekananda. So sometimes you have to be forgiving of the Bengalis. So that is the other mandal. There are 2 mandals which have affected modern India. Sir, I could go on and on. I'm really inspired by your speech today. I thank you. It's really an outstanding speech and excellent. I'm very happy. I think we have am I correct? We have a recording of the speech, so we will be putting it on YouTube. Not everybody could attend today. It's a Saturday morning, so please understand that. But I would like the audience to give a big round of sound, resounding applause to our speaker today. And I'll conclude my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such insightful addressal. I now request Major General Shishir Mahajan for a vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday was a landmark day in the history of India. You all are aware that the word empowerment, which was a vision of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, actually truly it became effective. A private company, Skyroot Aerospace, launched a private Vikram S rocket in the space, in the suborbit, very successfully. And the monopoly of Indian Space Research Organization was to some extent taken away. So this is true empowerment, although not really, I would say, as close to what Babasaheb visualized. I must thank Honorable Justice Gokhale for this excellent presentation on the subject of vision of Babasaheb Ambedkar for India. He brought out the vision very lucidly. And I remember a few things, which I'll not repeat what Dr. Ranade mentioned, but he mentioned that not only he helped Dalit women, but the other Hindu women also by drafting the Hindu Code Bill, which actually helped a lot of women. And also the definition of the word Hindu, which not many people are aware of. A consequence of the vision was the Atrocity Act, which was again came later, and the guidelines given by the Supreme Court to use this act. He brought about the conditions of the Dalit in Pakistan and Bangladesh, which we really are not aware of. This is something which I was not aware of. And also that Gandhi and Ambedkar are required now for solving the social problems that they exist now. We require such people. So thank you very much for this presentation. I must also thank the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Ranade, for helping us host this talk and for acting as the chairman, and Gokhale Institute for giving us this infrastructure and this excellent hall and all the facilities. And the staff was so cooperative in organizing this event. I must thank Kogekar family for allowing Center for Advanced Strategic Studies to host this wonderful event every year, and we will continue to do so in the future. And I must thank the audience for being very interactive and asking many questions and being patient in listening to this speech. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
proceed to Gokhale Bungalow for lunch. Thank you for being here with us.